Welcome to Curious Sports Pulse. This is the Java Energy Hour, the number one show that says it will last an hour, but is closer to a half hour, probably 20 minutes. Now, we are going to get into what Brian Windhorst said after the game, after game three. There were parts of that game we nailed. There were. In terms of the role that Kyrie Irving would have, in terms of what we would see from the Mavericks, and kind of what we would see from the Celtics. Now, what we didn't see coming is how this Dallas offense would just continue to struggle. But knowing what we know now, watching how the first three games have unfolded in front of our very eyes, I'm not sure why we're speaking more poetically than not this morning. But either way, it's now pretty clear why this series is unfolding the way it is. And whether you had Boston or Dallas, I think one thing's a little clear though, right? This has been something of a disappointing series, I would say. And again, I've said this multiple times for a sport, for a league in the NBA that requires a good postseason, and at the very least a good NBA Finals, I would say this has fallen a little short. But first, let's get to UFC 303. We'll talk more on the NBA and everything that Brian Windhorst said here in a moment. But first, UFC 303. I mean, it's never good when you're a couple days out from an event and the authorities on the sport, the authorities who would know what's going on, the who's who, are all expressing doubt. And they're all expressing, this isn't looking good. And this is what we're getting at the moment, particularly from Ariel, but also others in the space. Brendan Schaub said the same thing. And before we speak specifically on what they said, let's kind of break down what we all thought from this Conor McGregor Michael Chandler fight. This is definitely a fight that is trying to tap into what many view, and now we're speaking now, Jess. Let's if you are a diehard, if you are an avid follower of UFC, and try to separate yourself a little bit in terms of your own personal viewing habits. So right now, I'm trying to get more into the shoes, and I'll admit I'm more in between. I'm not as plugged in as I should be, but I'm for sure not a casual. I tune in every weekend, but I don't follow it throughout the week as I should. I focus mainly, soccer, basketball, football. But anyway, so I would say I'm somewhere in between, an avid, true, legitimate follower of UFC, and I'm definitely not a casual. At least if someone wants to quiz me on that, I'll happily I'll happily test my credentials. But anyway, I say all this to say, this is kind of a fight that was tailor-made for more of the casuals, for those who view that the sport was in its height. Let's just put, say 5-10 years ago. And 10 is probably pushing too much, but you get what I'm saying. And let's call it what it is, when Conor McGregor was at his best. That's when there were a lot of more casual eyeballs who would be tuned in to a UFC fight, and they were more or less tuned in for Conor McGregor. So in terms of relevancy, in terms of what happens for the winner, I mean, for both fighters, if this fight were still to go on, or if there had been zero hiccups, who would have been surprised if this had been the last fight for either of these two people, for either Conor or Michael? No one would be surprised. Now, are some speculating, are some hoping, are some wishing that this fight ends up being a further springboard for either Conor McGregor or Michael Chandler to then get back into it? Sure. But more likely than not, this was going to be something of a celebration of their career kind of fight. So now we're here. And I say not, and I say all this. Let me clarify. I'm saying all this not to belittle this fight. Well, it sounds like that's what you're doing, Gabriel. Well, it's not what I'm trying to do. Instead, I want to put this fight in perspective in terms of this fight was meant to bring eyeballs. Fair enough. A little bit of a cash grab. Fair enough, right? It's a business. But the relevancy and the fight for, who's best within the weight classes, the belts, right? That something like that isn't on the line. And something like that would never would be an eventual outcome from this fight. The winner of this isn't going to go on a deep run and defend the belt for 4 years. Right? This is much more likely was meant to always be just a one-off and a little bit of a tap into nostalgia. So I say all that to now say this. Why is that in the first place? Both these fighters they've had good careers. But in sports, especially combat sports, it's something you need to be plugged into. It's something where if you are halfway in, halfway out, or if you've retired and now want to come back, it's so hard to regain that edge. And that's true for any aspect in life. Right? Your habits, consistency, those are things that are hard to build on. Let alone in UFC when the other person is trying to actively stop you from being able to walk. So credit to Conor McGregor, credit to Michael Chandler. Right, we have the film crews following them. We see how they're training, how they're interacting with fighters. They're getting back into it. They love it. And now this is something of the finale. But with time off and no athlete has 100% focus on their sport, right? That would be unfair. But it's fair to say that a lot of their day, a lot of their lives when you're in your prime is focused on the sport. And so let's say 100% of your sport effort, 100% of your sport focus, whatever quantity you allot for your sport, that needs to be at 100%. And if it isn't, that's where you run into trouble, particularly in UFC, where your body naturally ages faster, I should say. So that's why it's a little harder in the UFC versus other sports, not really even my opinion, but I know someone's going to go out there and disagree with me, so I'll say my opinion. Pardon me. It's so much harder in this sport to be halfway in, halfway out. So something like what we're hearing now from Adriel Helwani, the positivity that I talked about exactly a week ago is nowhere to be found. That was always a strong likelihood. Either fighter pulling out, either fighter getting a serious injury due to revving it up too quickly for where they are in their respective careers, or either fighter getting cold feet. Now, I think it's more likely than not an injury that to be further disclosed, but it sounds like Michael Chandler's dealing with a couple broken toes. At least that's one report I saw. But more likely than not, I think it's one of the fighters at this point. I'm going to say Michael Chandler. It's at that point where they're dealing with an injury and they're just weighing the option. And both of these guys are saying, nah, is it worth it? Right? If you're Michael Chandler or you're Michael or Conor McGregor, what else do you have to prove? Why are you getting back into the octagon? And for the crowd that says that money solves everything, that it's always about the money. No, That can be a driving force, of course. But like what we saw with Dan Hurley, what I think we're seeing now, what we've seen in years past, money is always a part of the equation. But particularly when you're at the back half of your career, particularly when there isn't too much to gain in terms of further legacy or accolades, that money part of the equation becomes less and less. And so if Ariel and others, I'm just using Ariel because of his platform in the MMA hour. If he's saying that positivity is nowhere to be found, that's a pretty strong statement. And so reportedly now they're trying to look for other options, but we will see. We will see. More likely than I will be shocked if this fight goes on, and even if it does go on, I'll be shocked if it lives up to the current hype that a lot of people are placing on it. But moving on, let's focus now on the Boston Celtics side of things. Let's first talk about the positives and give credit. This is an overall good defensive unit. They're playing defense at a high level. And some are saying it's the team defensive effort. And that's true. But when you consider how the Dallas Mavericks are playing offense, they're playing a lot of heavy ISO sets, one-on-one ball. You have to then give credit individually to the Boston Celtic defenders. Mainly how Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday have been able to be physical without fouling and make it difficult. Now, why am I not putting Jayson Tatum? I mean, the stat has been showed where when he's the primary ball defender, people are still having their way. And Jayson Tatum, what he's really doing well is he's doing well at getting position and grabbing boards. That's really what he's doing. That's been the best part of his game in the NBA Finals. I don't want to say he's being a bad defender. That wouldn't be fair. But I wouldn't put him in the category of being a good to great defender this NBA Finals. I think that's an overstatement. So defensively, the team, good team defense, good individual defense. And that's what's required when you're playing the likes of Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving in a heavy ISO set, a bunch of ISO sets. You just have to be good one-on-one. And then obviously the help sliding over. So that's something that the Boston Celtics largely are doing well. And defense shouldn't be. It needs to be evaluated not in terms of, oh, well, he let so-and-so score, but they're still dropping 30 plus. Yeah, it's the NBA, and the rules are bent toward the offense. So you need to keep that in mind if you're going to evaluate someone's defense. And there's no hand check anymore since when was that? 04? Someone will have to fact check me on that, but I believe it was either early 2000s or late 90s when they got rid of the hand check. So there's only so much that you can do defensively. Now, let's take a moment and think. Why is it that people are still unwilling to give Jayson Tatum credit? He shot efficiently, or at least more efficiently. He followed my rule. And what's my rule? If you're going to have whatever your field goals attempted are, you need to at least score that many points. That's my rule. And to be fair, full disclosure, obviously that's not my rule. That's something that a lot of NBA coaches and a lot of basketball coaches say. So that's me stealing from someone. No idea where it originated from. Unlike Joe, where he correctly showed me the way in terms of a series doesn't start until a road team steals one away from home, right? That's what at Java Joe taught me, and that's my source on that. So unlike that specific scenario, I don't know exactly where this originated from, but this is just something when talking with coaches that you generally hear in terms of shooting efficiency. So, Jayson Tatum, he does have 31 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, 46.7 fantasy points scored. Good for him. But we have to be honest. Did he play better than Hauser, Tillman, Maxi Kleber? I can't believe we're having this conversation right now. Yeah, he did play better than those guys, for example. Did he play better than Al Horford and Derek White? I'll give you that. Did he play better than Doncic? I would say for game 3, yes. I think that's fair. Although we're about to show you something here in a moment that you see that's kind of up for debate. Now, did he play better than Irving? Yeah, I wouldn't say so. So, right, I'm throwing out all these names in terms of how we evaluate players. It's going to be different, and it should be different for everyone. So now, let's focus on Jayson Tatum. 11 of 26, 4 of 13 from 3, 31 points. So he fits the rule. 26 field goals attempted, 31 points scored. Now, this is something I've been saying about Jayson Tatum. He is a good player. He's good at filling the stat sheet, which that shouldn't be just dismissed. Right? When people say, "Oh, he's just good at filling the stat sheet," well, it's hard to fill a stat sheet. But the best player on your team, the best player in a winning organization, ultimately has to play well enough quarters 1 through 3 to put the team in a position to win. And then down the stretch, make the right and winning plays. That's what you expect from your best player. Now, Jayson Tatum doesn't need to necessarily do that on this Boston team, particularly when you're facing a Dallas team that's struggling. But case in point, this is what's separating him from being whether I think most people consider him a superstar at this point. But this is why the criticisms on Jayson Tatum are still legitimate. He's not having, right? It's not the number one player of old. I shouldn't even say of old. It's not your typical number one player where it's them who go out and just go grab a bucket. It's not them. It's Jayson Tatum isn't like the typical number one player where it's very clear they're the vocal, they're the leader on the floor, and they're the ones who get it done in crunch time, and they're the ones where you say it's because of them that they won. Highly up for debate this series. For Tatum, the argument is his talent. It can't be really much of anything else. If you want to argue Drew Holiday, I'll listen. Now, this game, he didn't have the offense, right? The offensive matching that we've seen, but he's been more consistent, I would say, and for sure on defense, he's done great work. And then, of course, Jaylen Brown, who unless something really magical happens, more on that in a moment with Dallas and what Brian Windhorst said. I mean, he's very clearly your NBA Finals MVP. Jaylen Brown is very clearly. But now, why am I still being hard on Jayson Tatum? Because look at the fourth quarter. 12 minutes played, so he played the whole fourth. And where is this? I don't know what website this is because I took a screenshot, so apologies. But either way, anyone can verify this. In the fourth quarter, Jayson Tatum, 1 of 5 from the field, 0 of 1 from three, 4 points scored, 1 turnover, 2 defensive rebounds, and a plus minus of -8. When you're watching that game, when Dallas needed to go on a big run, we all saw what happened in terms of the Celtics were very fortunate that um that Dallas really we'll speak to Dallas in a moment. For now, I'll just say it suffice to say Dallas had them on the ropes, and they were fortunate that they being the Boston Celtics had a large third quarter cushion, and that Dallas really imploded. I'll get more on that in a moment on the Dallas side of things. But as someone who's watching this game, and I'll admit I was rooting for a Dallas comeback. Why? I want to see more basketball. I was thrilled every time late Jayson Tatum had the ball in his hands. Now, where is he his most dangerous? And we have been saying this. Where is he his most effective? And this is true of, most small forwards, power forwards, and centers. Duh, down low or in the paint. So, as someone who was rooting for the comeback, because A, that would have been cool, and B, again, I want to see more basketball games. I was thrilled every time Jayson Tatum touched the ball and settled. And in the mic'd up, I think it was mic'd up, or I think they're mic'd up, or whatever. However, cameras and microphones are good enough nowadays, where I don't think they need to be technically mic'd up. But you get the point. You hear Jayson Tatum say, "Hey guys, we can't just settle for threes or contested looks." I forget if he said what he exactly said, but the gist was, "Hey guys, we can't just settle. Don't take contested shots." And Doris Burke, credit to her, said right away, I would be giving a side eye if I was a teammate of Jayson Tatum right there. Absolutely. Absolutely. As soon as we hear now, I don't know if that was said in the first quarter, second quarter, or right then. Typically, they play audio right there too. You can tell when they play audio from throughout the game, and you can tell when they play audio from that previous timeout. It looked to me like it was that previous timeout, but regardless, for that message to come from Tatum and for him to then play the way he did, especially in the fourth, I really don't think he's going. I think this is going to be more akin. Now, I'm not comparing these two situations at all. All I'm comparing, this is what an analogy is. I'm comparing two specifics of a situation. I'm not comparing both situations holistically, okay? But Jayson Tatum winning the ring this year with the Boston Celtics, I think will be perceived by the media very similarly to Kevin Durant's rings with the Warriors. Yeah, you won them. No one can take them away from you. They're earned. Nothing in the NBA is given. Everything is earned. But not really doing a lot to change the narrative or perception or to erase the questions that we have of you. Jayson Tatum did what he needed quarters 1 through 3. But he still has that lingering feeling, that lingering concern of if you need a bucket late, if you need someone to make the right play late, can you trust Jayson Tatum? The answer to that for me is still no. And now, case in point, let's now move on. Let's move on now to Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks more specifically. We'll do that while first comparing Boston Celtics to the Dallas Mavericks. Let's go to the bench first. The Celtics ran 8 deep last night, 12 points from the bench. The Mavericks, they ran 6 deep last night, of 11, 12, 13, 16 points from the bench. So largely, I would say that's zero sum game ish. However, the hustle plays and timing of those points and timing of great plays on defense favored the Celtics. Consequently, I don't put all my stock into plus minus. That can be something of a deceiving stat. But what my eyes told me, what I'm seeing from the plus minus, this lines up. Hauser plus 16, Tillman plus 9. And now compare that to Kleber and Tim Hardaway Jr., minus 13 and minus 16. It was pretty apparent. And now Kleber only got 8 minutes of play, but Tim Hardaway Jr., especially when Doncic fouled out, for him to get 19 points or in 19 minutes, 0 points, and to have minus 16 plus minus, that's pretty telling. But now, Luka Doncic specifically, and what Brian Windhorst said. It's pretty concerning, I would say. Very accurate what Brian Windhorst said, but I truly don't think he goes far enough. So we're going to paraphrase more or less what I remembered him saying to Scott Van Pelton. But essentially what he's saying is you're foul hunting. We've asked you time and time again, we being the Dallas Mavericks organization, please stop focusing on the referees. Please just focus on your own game. Let us worry about the reffing, as in Jason Kidd. Please just focus on what you can control. Particularly in that moment. For you to go after the game and complain about officiating, for you to say, I fouled out, that's crazy, that shouldn't happen, be better. That's showing complete lack of awareness. And for me is concerning, and I'm being fair. This is coming from me where I have been on the record. I have said multiple times Luka Doncic is the best current player in the league. And I still think that. My viewpoint is we're going to see after this NBA Finals, we're going to have a leak or just an outright report of whatever injury is bothering Luka Doncic right now because he is not moving well laterally. Never been a, and that to me that explains some of the defensive issues because we have seen how he moved, particularly in the not the Thunder series, in the Timberwolves series. We see how he was playing. We see not that he would ever be a great defender, but we see it was better. And for sure, his lateral movement backwards was much better. And that's what's killing him right now defensively. And that's why he's being picked on. So with that being said, it didn't really matter because when Luka Doncic was in the game, they were right in the thick of things. They nearly completed that comeback, and they for sure made it interesting. So we talk about plus minus. Luka Doncic plus 9 on the evening. Jayson Tatum minus 4 on the evening. So Tatum, better defender, had a better defensive night than Doncic. Fine, I'll give you that. But overall, Doncic had a better overall game, and that's simply because the league, the NBA, the rules favor the offensive player. And despite a rough middle, By a rough middle, I mean it was a rough second quarter and a rough third quarter for the Dallas Mavericks overall. They got it going in the fourth. And I was happy to see Luka Doncic settle less. The 1 of 7 from 3 it was telling, and I'm glad he then got into the paint, just exploited the matchups. Was he fouled a couple times? Probably, but I was okay with the no calls there. I really was. And I don't really want to talk about officiating. It's hard to be an official at this level. There were missed calls, there were bad calls on both sides. Um, for example, for whatever reason, Al Horford is going coast to coast at the end, and he was pushed out of bounds. Was he also falling out of bounds? Yes, but yeah, he was helped out of bounds. That should have been a foul. I also didn't like the foul on that screen that they called of Drew Holiday fighting over, I think it was PJ Washington. I didn't like that call because to me it looked like he had established position and that Drew Holiday just wasn't aware of the pick. So I didn't like that call. And so were there a couple times where Doncic was touched while driving to the basket? Yeah, but he also initiated a lot of contact throughout the game. He was foul hunting. And so I honestly prefer how that specifically was called last night. I prefer that. Fine, if you want to foul hunt, go ahead. Good luck. But we're not going to call it marginal contact. So I'm okay with that. What you can't be okay with if you're Luka Doncic and if you're going to complain about officiating and saying, "Oh, it was 6 fouls, how dare they? Be better." Then why are you giving up 2 really bad take fouls where you then raise your hand and say, "Yeah, I fouled him." I'm all for the take foul. I'm all for that as a strategy. I disagree with it. I'd honestly rather just play straight up, and if they make a shot, they make a shot, fine. So that's where I lean in that and on that side of the debate. I don't like the take foul, but I get it. And some coaches call it the professional foul. I'm okay with that as a strategy sometimes. More times than not, I don't like it. But if that's what you want to do, fine. Do you know who it shouldn't be executing that take foul? Ever your star player, your most important player. That's who it should never be. For this exact reason. So you give up 2 stupid fouls. I'm gonna go ahead and say they're stupid. I don't. All right, if you want the transition, or and in that case, it's not a transition take, but you get what I'm saying. It's in transition and it's a take foul. It's not a transition take foul. Why? Because right there are other players. There are other players ahead of the ball, et cetera, et cetera. We need to come up with a better term for that because there is the transition take foul, and now there's what I'm saying. It was in transition because Luka Doncic missed the shot and/or it was a turnover, so he fouled whilst in transition on the take. We're getting to so hopefully that clarifies why I'm explaining why I'm saying things the way I'm saying things. But either way, that can't be Luka Doncic doing that. If you're not even truly making an honest effort to get a turnover, I'm okay with that if you are trying to get the ball and you're trying to force the turnover or speed them up. But that's for sure not what was happening in that moment with Luka Doncic. He was frustrated and just wanted the foul, and he even raised his hand in that moment and said, "Yeah, that one's on me." So was he set at the end? I thought so in real time. But again, don't make it close. You know that that's a 50-50 call. And the reach in at the end, and I'll be honest, I thought they had reviewed that reach in and that they had lost their challenge. And then I was a little confused that they still had the challenge for the blocking foul on Doncic that ended up being the 6th foul. But Apparently, they only called a timeout there, but I'll admit, in the moment, I was confused, but, that's neither here nor there. If you're gonna have 2 stupid fouls that you take and you even raise your hand, you can't complain afterward, and if you're foul hunting throughout the game and you put yourself in a position later on where you leave it in the hands of the refs late, you can't then complain that you fouled out of a game just because it's the stage of the NBA finals. That can't be what happens. And this is obviously a product of losing. He's frustrated, fine. But instead of talking about the officials, I'd rather he focuses on the things that he can control, which is offensively, we know he's going to be able to get his. I would love to see a little more ball movement like what we saw against the Timberwolves. That version of the Dallas team for sure makes this a more competitive series, and it's why I had them beating the Boston Celtics. They've leaned in a little too much for my liking into their strengths, which is the greatness, offensive greatness of Doncic and Irving. I would still like to see a little more ball movement and a little more involvement of other players in the offense, just so that everyone can get into a rhythm. That Dallas team maybe wasn't the best NBA team this year, but they were certainly the most dangerous. And you know what's more disappointing, not just about Doncic complaining to the refs, but this Dallas team in general, is they've really just played poorly, and I mean really poorly, in the first quarter of game 1 and the third quarter of game 3. Now Boston has edged them out in other areas, but largely for the most part, they've been in the game and or they've showed that they can play at the same level, that they can at times even be better than Boston throughout the rest of that series. Of this series, I mean. So if this is but regardless, that's just how I view things. If you're going if you're going to play this way, if this is the hill you are going to die on, then you can't be upset with the officiating afterward. Because by nature, in a lot of ISO play where you're going downhill, there's going to be contact, and you're going to leave a lot in the hands of the officials. So but largely, I think what we're seeing is a team that's now, again, leaning too far into their strengths. But this is a team offensively that just has hit a ceiling when this is their main and own slash only line of attack. Case in point, the defense has honestly largely been pretty decent. Now, a lot of it is they're daring Boston to shoot and they're forcing Boston to make threes. Hence why we've seen the first quarter offensive explosion in the first game, in game 1, and the third quarter offensive explosion in game 3. So you live with that. But I mean, largely, The defensively, Dallas has been fine, and Boston has had their struggles on offense. I would argue mainly because of Tatum and his crowning of the Mamba mentality. I mean, Boston only scored 107 points in game one, and that's the most that they scored. So super doable. Dallas not being able to get to triple digits is more concerning. So, looking forward now to game four. If you're Boston, I mean, let's call it what it is. You're more or less either hoping Jayson Tatum starts to knock down these contested fadeaways. You keep up the pressure on defense, and you hope for another brilliant first, second, or third quarter so you can establish that cushion. And my rule for when a team is making a comeback is you have to be within 8 points with 8 minutes to go. Anything else is usually too large. And I can't remember the game, but at that magic mark, I've only seen a team be able to complete a comeback once. And everything had to go right. And that's largely why I have that rule of 8 points within 8 points or within with 8 minutes to go, because everything has to go right, including refereeing. 50-50 decisions have to go your way. And so that's why it was, if memory serves, it was 10 points with eight to go. And that's just too much. You need literally every domino to fall your way. But what that showed is that this game was still, was very much winnable in game three and in game two, despite Boston having this large lead. So now, if you're Dallas, again, I would love to see them play a little more team offense. I would love to see a little more ball movement. Probably not where we're going to get. More importantly, I would love to see Luka Doncic have some cryo chamber treatment or whatever it is Tom Brady does, so that we can see this side play them a little closer to full strength. But that's probably not going to happen. Either way, what is likely going to happen / what can we hope for? If you're Dallas, you know what Boston's going to do defensively. They're going to go at Doncic. So the times where you are asleep, the times where you just don't, and this was best illustrated. Speaking of Tatum, we'll give credit. That was a gorgeous pass. The one where Kyrie Irving lost it, and then I think it was Derek White who then hit the three from the right side. But keeping an eye on being able to monitor ball and man, that's so essential. And that kind of breakdown cannot happen. Be aware of your man, be looking at the ball, be in a help position, and then being able to recover. Right? Fundamental defensive basketball. So and you're always going to have lapses. Obviously, you're always going to have moments where shoot, that one's on me. I shouldn't have had it. But just minimizing those so that you truly make so that you truly make Boston earn each basket, or again, you can live with a contest. You can live with Jayson Tatum trying to get his 30-foot fadeaway. You could live if those start falling in. That's fine. But being a little sharper defensively and then offensively goes without saying. Obviously, we need to get more baskets. Okay, but how? If you're not getting in a rhythm, if it showed very early, you're Irving or you're Doncic, and you can't get in a rhythm, particularly from three. I would say, I would say, because the tendency of officiating, and this is human nature. This isn't me saying it's right, but the tendency is going to be to want to extend the series or to always favor whoever the underdog is. That's just human nature. Now, they try their best. They try to be as impartial as possible. That's what that's just what tends to happen. That's just human nature. So, for knowing that if the shot just isn't falling for whatever reason and you feel out of a rhythm, and at times you're watching Kyrie Irving, you're watching Luka Doncic, and it's not a force in the traditional sense of it's a bad shot. It is oftentimes a bad shot, but those are makeable shots for them, and that's what they've been doing all year long. Fine. I I'm no longer in the business of trying to correct something that is a habit of people, and if they don't see it as an issue, then why should I? Fine. But but if it's truly not falling, and you can tell Doncic and Irving know they're not shooting it with 100% confidence like what we're used to seeing at times. It's almost like, ah, shoot, I have to make this spectacular shot or I have to hoist this one up because the offense isn't clicking for the team at the moment. That's just and not just threes, that also longer jumpers, jump shots off of the dribble, the fadeaways once you're in the paint. That's what I'm referring to as well. So with all of that, and again, I didn't love Doncic going to the podium and mentioning officiating. Like I said, I think it's all zero sum game ish in terms of there are going to be bad calls on both sides and there are going to be missed calls on both sides. So anyone analyzing just one side of it, I could very easily pinpoint where there were missed calls on both sides, on both ends of the court. And we all say that we want the game to be officiated one way throughout the game and that the time and score shouldn't matter. So then of course people are going to say one way or another, hey, you can't call that a blocking foul on Doncic in the NBA finals and have that be the one he falls out on so close to the game ending. I or you can't have that be the way the game ends. All right. Let's remember the UConn moving screen. I disagree with that entirely. I'd rather it just however the game's been called, that's how that's how it should be from minute 1 through minute 48. That's how I view it. And just but knowing that it's just so hard to officiate at this level, that inconsistencies are going to happen. It's up to you to just move on. You have to just move on to the next play. So I that's really all I want to say on officiating because again, for me that's a cop out answer in terms of or that's and if you want to cope, you cope in your own way. I am someone and if that's what you choose to be outraged over officiating, I challenge you to just pick up a whistle and go. I rec leagues are always hiring. Go ahead and try to referee. Go ahead and try to officiate a game at your local YMCA or park league, and let's see how many games you are able to get through without a complaint. So if you think officiating is so easy, or if you're saying how did they miss that call, or why this, why that, pick up the whistle, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and see. And you can report back to me. Report back to me. So that's why I don't put too much stock in that. That we're now on a 5 minute rant on something that I don't even want to particularly talk about. But I say all that as a disclaimer for you. We all know that more likely than not, any benefit of the doubt will go to Dallas for Game 4. Why? It's just human nature to want to extend the series and to help out the underdog. So that's why if that shot isn't fouling, just put your head down. Now, are there times where you're going to have a missed call still? Yes. But put the pressure on their defense, force the issue, make the refs, put them in a hard position. And more likely than not, you are the most creative scorer slash the best finisher in the NBA at the moment. More likely than not, you're going to get something. And a lot of shots just simply haven't been falling that are terrible looks for everyone else in the world, but they're good looks for you. You being Doncic and Irving. So I think if you stay with that approach, just stay aggressive, kick out if they end up building a two-man defense, three-man defense to protect the paint. Get the others more involved that way. Since we're not starting the offense, we're not initiating the offense with a pass or a screen to get someone else an open jumper. Fine. We want to get squeeze the most off the Doncic and Irving one-on-one magic. Fine. Have that be the way then that you get others involved, please. And look at me saying please. Why? Because we picked the Dallas Mavericks to win this series. And so is that pick looking particularly strong right now? Is that pick looking particularly good at the moment? Not really. Speak briefly on Boston, then we'll get out of here. Boston has impressed me in terms of we know what they're getting time in and time out, and they have been the team that has showed up more consistently throughout these finals. They have looked like the desperate team. They have looked like the team that's out to prove something, and they for sure have showed up with more energy and more of a desperation throughout. That's what I'm seeing. And so that level of care, of intensity, of detail You have to give credit to Missoula there. I mean, apparently he shows UFC fighters right before they tap out. So are we seeing a Zen Master throwback like performance from him at the moment? Sure. So you have to give credit to Joe Missoula for the Celtics have approached games, have entered games with the better mindset and better intensity throughout. That is an undisputable. Indisputable. That being said, we are still going with Dallas Mavericks making history, getting the reverse sweep, and winning this in 7. That's all we have for today. Stay tuned. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. We will be on not Sports Hub Media, on E-Rock Show. The name's Scoutcast Media Hub. Scoutcast Media Hub. We will be there 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, have a great rest of your day. Mavs and stuff.